Good afternoon, Paul. How are you?
I'm OK, thank you. Welcome to the show. How concerned are you about the state of our schools?
Very concerned. The National Audit Office report confirms the sorts of stories that we hear from our members on a regular basis. So, like you say, there is a particular worry about schools with this RAC concrete, the reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete. Now, I just want to say, actually, it wasn't a bad building material at the end of the Second World War when we had to quickly erect a lot of schools around the country, damaged by bombing, etc. This country needed to grow. But everyone knew all along that it had an estimated lifespan of about 30 years, and we're way past it. Everyone knew it's a form of concrete that deteriorates, especially if there's any water getting into it. So this has been known for some time, and the government, though, isn't just doing nothing like enough about it. I heard this morning about a parent who'd had concrete fall off the school building, hit her on the head. Other schools are having to close and move their children out of the school because of imminent danger. The government has, in 2021, changed its risk estimate to say critical, very likely that some school buildings might collapse or otherwise fail. But the trouble is they don't know which buildings they are. They're saying it's very likely across the whole set of school buildings, but they don't know which ones. And so there's an urgent need for survey work and then investment in our schools. But from our point of view, it isn't just these extreme cases. These really matter, these life and limb cases. But it's also so many of our members tell us that during rain, the water can come into their classrooms. They've got buckets on the floor. So many members are telling us if there's a heat wave this summer, they won't be able to teach because it's just too hot. The classrooms aren't properly ventilated. They don't have cooling systems. So there needs to be a huge investment in our school infrastructure. We're very worried about it.
Yeah, I'm no building expert. Anybody that knows me knows that. But from what you're saying, this goes back beyond the current government. If this stuff, this reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, was scheduled to last, I think you said, 30, 40 years, we're well beyond that now. So it should have been dealt with a long time ago. And if you're going to look at all schools and surveying and then refurbing or rebuilding, that's a huge cost at a time when we've got an economic crisis.
It is a huge cost, and it does take planning. In my union.
So has it been negligent from various governments down the years then, this?
But we're not affiliated to the Labour Party, but let me just say this government is more negligent than the last. Because under the last government, we had this thing called Building Schools for the Future, and there was an extensive programme where schools were being rebuilt, and they were dealing with some of these questions, but that's been massively cut back. So the DfE estimates that they need to be spending £7 billion a year on these sorts of things. They're spending a third of that. So 2/3 of it isn't being spent. I mean, I don't know whether you've tried to get a government minister on your programme today, but they aren't appearing anywhere. They're not talking about this. They are just turning a blind eye to it, I think, like they're turning a blind eye to the teacher shortages. But turning away from it doesn't sort it out. The problem is just going to get worse. Because if there's when you've got a design life expectancy of 30 years, you expect it to go on a bit beyond that. But like you say, that lifetime is getting longer and longer. And in some schools, water will be getting in, and we're not sure which ones they are. And there could be danger from that. There's also asbestos in schools, and that's another problem that should be being dealt with. The National Audit Office report also points out, and this is a much more modern commitment, that government has committed to reducing the amount of carbon, CO2 emissions that come from government buildings. And school buildings are the biggest component of all government buildings. And the National Audit Office is saying the government isn't on top of that either. Now, it seems to us in the NEU, the National Education Union, that they should be looking at both these problems together. They should be looking at the schools that have got this RAC or the schools that have got asbestos and doing the changes there, getting rid of that and doing the carbon, doing the future proofing for the climate change. At the same time, you could do two birds with one stone sort of thing. You could get a double benefit from doing it if they had a plan for it. But it does require cost. It does require money. But we want to say to politicians of all political parties, but this is the one that's in power and isn't spending the money, they've got to stop seeing education as a cost. They've got to see it as an investment. It's an investment in the future of our country, and it's an investment in the children in the system.